if you go to YouTube, is just a personal address that I gave to our Harvest Rock Church family. And if you haven't seen that, I want to encourage you to see that, because I can't repeat 2 hours worth of messaging that I gave in May. And I gave 7 reasons why we are opening up as a church. Now, this came by revelation and by a word from the Lord on May 9th. And this is way before the governor gave us permission to meet. And we had shared that on Pentecost Sunday, May 31st, we were going to open up. And some of you remember how we have gone through this journey. And I gave the 7 reasons why, but I have to be honest with you, I did not want to gather initially, because it's just too much work. And I shared candidly, part of it was my insecurity, my own flesh, just dealing with the city. We have such a good reputation with the city, and I didn't want to come across as just being a maverick in our city, and we've really built equity. For those who don't know, this auditorium is used to serve our city for concerts, civic events, and so we've really developed a wonderful relationship. In fact, the mayor, Bogart, who was the previous mayor, gave us a citation honoring us for 10 years of serving the city on our 10th anniversary of owning this building. And by the way, this is very significant. Father's Day is when we moved into this building. So in 2004, on this day, we moved into this building. Can we thank God for it, what he has done? So this is a very significant time. And so basically, I gave the 7 reasons why we were going to open up. And then on May 25th, on Memorial Day, Governor Newsom made a special announcement, and that the good news is that churches can open up. The bad news is that it's with limitation, with 20% capacity or 100 people, whatever's the less. And I have to be honest with you, I really struggled with that mandate. I felt it was arbitrary. I felt that it was not constitutional. So I called our attorney. Now, for those who don't know, we contracted one of the top religious freedom attorney with Liberty Counsel. His name is Matt Staver. He's been in the news. He's won a number of cases during this COVID-19 for churches in other states that, each state is different, but one major one was in Florida that decided to meet even during when President Trump early on had locked down for 30 days, starting on March 15th. And they won that case, and they could meet. And they've been meeting ever since without any limitation or restriction. So this is kind of attorney that is working for us as well. So I called him up, and he said the same things that I was sensing. He says it's not constitutional, it's arbitrary, that, of course, the state cannot establish religion, but they can't interfere with the freedom thereof of us, and telling us a number out of the blue was just not constitutional. But I have to be honest, that spirit of fear came upon me again, and instead of doing what I felt like God spoke to me back in May 9th to do, I acquiesced, and we decided to meet with mitigation. And so we've been meeting now for the last 4 weeks with 100 or less in this auditorium. And so this is why I feel that I need to confess. All that to say is that I feel I disobeyed the Lord, and I allowed the spirit of intimidation. It's interesting, though, the passage in 2 Timothy chapter 1:7, God's not given us a spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind. That word fear is a very interesting word, and it appears several times in the New Testament, and the best translation is cowardice, being a coward. And it talks about that in Revelation 21, that the ones who are going to be judged are those who are cowardly, not standing up. Because when you realize it is a spirit, the enemy is the enemy, that we are in a spiritual battle. And so we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against spiritual wickedness in the heavenly places. And I believe one of the things that the enemy is trying to do during this COVID-19 is shut down the church. It's interesting that this is the Hebrew year of the pay, where the church is supposed to speak, but we've been silenced by this lockdown. But here's the way we overcome. It's Revelation 12, verse 11. They overcame the devil by the blood of the Lamb, the word of their testimony, not loving their lives even unto death. That's how the church has expanded. And so, Pastor Jay said something really profound. He says, after 9/11, the churches were packed. And people had a chance to hear the gospel like never before. And I personally think that we lost the momentum of that, but here's the point he was making. He said, we've had something worse than 9/11 when you think of the deaths with COVID-19, with the meltdown of our economy, 40 million unemployed. Then on top of that, George Floyd and the tragedy that we saw unfold before us of racism in our nation and the protests. We have gone through a perfect storm. Now's the time to open our doors for people to come and worship, but we have shut down. God called me to come to Los Angeles for a great harvest. And I go to Montanato's church in February, and I'm whacked by the Holy Spirit on the floor. He said, change the name to Harvest Rock Church once again, because I'm after the harvest. Start prophesying that. And then, we come back and we start meeting. We have momentum, and within 2 weeks, we lock down. And I feel that we're in a warfare, and by gathering together, and I want to obey the original word God gave me May 9th, that we're going to open up starting next week with mitigation, though. Here's what we're going to be doing. You can look online, and all the guidelines are there, but 3 things that are different is that we are going to provide a spacing up in the balcony that if you feel like you want to come participate, but you still feel, you need to have some social distancing, we're going to provide that. But on the floor, we're not. You can sit wherever you want to sit. Secondly, what we're going to be doing is that we're going to ask you to go online and when you register, just sign a waiver for us, one-time waiver saying that we're not liable because you're coming on your own. You're absolutely free. I do pray that you really do pray and ask Jesus whether you should come or not. We're still encouraging those with underlying conditions to stay home because they're high risk. But again, we want to have freedom, and we want you to hear from Jesus whether you're to participate or not. The third thing we're going to do is that we're going to be asking you to wear masks to the building and leaving the building. But during worship, you have freedom whether you want to wear the mask or not. And, it's really interesting because Sue and I went to our favorite restaurant. It just opened up on Monday. And so we had our honey time, what we normally do once a week. And we went to Taylor's Steakhouse. And it's interesting, as the hostess greeted us, said you could wear the mask to the point where you're seated. But once you're seated, you could take off the mask. And then I just went back, my gym's open, and so I went there and they said the same thing. Once you get on the machine, you could take off your mask. And so we're saying when you come and you meet people, wear your mask, but when you come, you can have freedom to wear it or not wear it. And so that's the difference from our previous directions on the website. Now, finally, we're not going to be gathering up here. So I'm not going to be wearing a mask, but don't want to be in front of me. But I don't want you, we're still not going to gather up here because we still want to practice wisdom and social distancing. We're still going to sanitize everything. We're going to take your temperature. All that will be on the website. But anyway, I wanted to confess, again, thank you. I believe I repented before the Lord. I feel his grace and mercy. Thank you for forgiving me for giving into the fear of man and vacillating during that time where I felt so clearly the Lord spoke to me. But